10 darkest secrets in England's history. Number 10. Meghan Markle's Archie's skin color, revelation. Number 10 happened so recently, you probably watched it live. Before we dive into the list, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our weekly history breakdowns. March 2021. You're watching a couple you've followed for years sit down with Oprah Winfrey, and in one sentence, everything you thought you knew about the modern monarchy shifts under you. You remember Meghan Markle marrying into the royal family in 2018, the first mixed-race woman to join its senior ranks. If you were paying attention, you'd have noticed her press coverage felt different, harsher, more personal than anything aimed at other royal wives. But that's not the whole story. During her pregnancy, Meghan says, a conversation happened somewhere inside the family about how dark her unborn baby's skin might be, not a tabloid rumor you can shrug off. A real conversation, she says, that she was never meant to hear about. She says it out loud, live, to tens of millions of people just like you. She won't name who said it. Harry only clarifies it wasn't the Queen or Prince Philip. And by that point, you're not fixated on who anymore, you're fixated on the fact that it happened at all. Here's what the palace gives you back. 2 sentences. Concern noted. Recollections may vary. No denial, no name. If you are hoping for a real answer, you don't get one. And that silence tells you more than any statement could. But if you think that's the most explosive thing a royal has ever admitted on camera, wait, because number 9 isn't about a comment someone regretted. It's about a friendship the palace spent years trying to make disappear. Number 9. Prince Andrew's Jeffrey Epstein connection. Number 9 is the one that ended a working royal's public life almost overnight. You already know the name Prince Andrew. What you might not know is how deep his friendship with financier Jeffrey Epstein actually ran years of access to Epstein's world, dressed up as trade diplomacy. Here's the part that should stop you. Epstein was convicted in 2008 of procuring a minor for prostitution. Andrew didn't walk away. There's a photo the two of them together in Central Park 2 years after that conviction. What happened next changed everything. In 2019, Virginia Giuffre alleges she was trafficked to Andrew at 17 encounters, she says, in London, New York, and on Epstein's private island. Andrew's answer is, a televised interview so bad you'll want to watch it just to believe it's real. No memory of meeting her. Doubts about a photo that clearly shows them together. A claim he physically couldn't have sweated that night. Watch how fast it falls apart. Charities cut ties within days. By early 2022, the Queen herself strips Andrew of his military titles and tells him to stop using His Royal Highness. He settles Giuffre's lawsuit later that year, no admission of guilt, terms never disclosed to you or anyone else. Notice what's different here. The usual royal playbook, stay silent, wait it out, didn't work this time. But scandal management is one thing. What happens when the family can't even manage its own grief in front of the entire world? That's number 8, and it might be the coldest 5 days in modern royal history. Number 8. The Crown's cold response to Princess Diana's death. Number 8 is the week the monarchy almost lost the country. Imagine losing someone the whole world loved, and the family closest to her says nothing for 5 straight days. That's not a hypothetical. That's what you'd have witnessed in the last week of August, 1997. You remember Diana, even if you were young, divorced from Charles, but still the most beloved royal alive by any measure. When she died in a Paris car crash, the shock would have reached you within minutes, wherever you were. Picture standing outside Buckingham Palace with the rest of the crowd, waiting for the family to say something, anything. Instead, silence. No statement, no flag lowered. The royal family stayed at Balmoral, 30 miles from where you'd have been grieving. Historians didn't expect what happened next, public grief turning into public anger, aimed squarely at the palace gates. Days pass and the mood turns. You're not alone in asking, where are they? The instinct to protect 2 young princes from the media storm is colliding, in real time, with a country that needs to see its monarchy grieve alongside it. When the Queen finally speaks, 5 days later, you already know it's too late to undo what you watched happen. But if you think royal silence is bad, wait until you hear what a royal actually said out loud in 1937. Number 7 is the moment Britain had to wonder if it had a Nazi sympathizer within reach of the throne. Number 7. Edward VIII's admiration for Hitler. Number 7 is the one the royal family still doesn't like to talk about. Try to picture a former King of England shaking hands with Adolf Hitler at his private mountain retreat, not in a history book, but as something British intelligence spent years quietly trying to piece together. You know the broad strokes. Edward VIII gave up the throne in 1936 to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee. What you might not know is that his real scandal was still ahead of him. In 1937, Edward and Wallis tore Nazi Germany a private trip the British government never approved. Photographs show him inspecting SS troops, meeting Nazi officials, and sitting down with Hitler himself for over 50 minutes, a conversation never officially explained to you or anyone else. But that's not the whole story. Declassified files, the Marburg files, later reveal Nazi officials thought they could turn Edward into a sympathizer, maybe even a puppet monarch. Some correspondence even suggests he passed along details of French military defences. Watch how the family handles it. Edward gets shipped off to govern the Bahamas for the rest of the war. Sounds like an honour. Look closer, and most historians will tell you it was a quarantine. If a royal flirting with the enemy shakes, you brace yourself. Number 6 is a royal who let his own cousin die rather than risk his throne. Number 6. George V refused the Romanovs asylum. Number 6 is a decision that took one signature to prevent and none to cause. What would you do if your own cousin begged you for a place to hide from a revolution and you said no? That's not a thought experiment for King George V. That's exactly what happened. You might not realize how close George V and Tsar Nicholas II of Russia actually were first cousins, close enough in looks that people mix them up. When the Russian Revolution toppled the Romanovs in 1917, Nicholas and his family were placed under house arrest. For a moment, real hope. Britain's own Prime Minister supports a plan to bring the Romanovs to safety. Arrangements are on the table. Then, with no public explanation, the offer disappears. Why? George protecting his own throne. Britain is mid-war, tension is rising at home, and sheltering a deposed, unpopular autocrat risks making the British monarchy look sympathetic to a regime the public despised. In July 1918, Nicholas, his wife, and all 5 of their children are executed in a basement by Bolshevik forces. George reportedly feels real regret afterward. Regret doesn't rewrite a decision a single British ship could have changed. If you're enjoying this breakdown, take a quick second to hit subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Now, keep that pattern in mind because number 5 proves royal self-interest isn't a modern habit. It's 500 years old and it starts with 2 children who never came back. Number 5. The Princes in the Tower. Number 5 is the oldest cold case on this entire list. 2 boys walked into the Tower of London in 1483. If you're waiting for the part where they walk back out, you'll be waiting forever. You've probably heard the setup. 12-year-old Edward V's father dies unexpectedly, and his uncle Richard is named protector of the boy and his younger brother. Within months, Richard declares both boys illegitimate, moves them into the tower for safekeeping, and crowns himself King Richard III. For a few weeks, you could still spot the boys playing in the tower gardens. Then, the sightings just stop. No trial, no announcement, no bodies, just silence. Word reaches Richard of a failed rescue attempt. Most historians will tell you this is the moment that sealed it. But that's not where it ends. Centuries later, 2 small skeletons turn up beneath a staircase in the tower, enough to fuel the legend, never enough to close the case. And in 2012, in one of history's stranger twists, Richard's own remains are found under a parking lot in Leicester. He wore the crown until the day he died. Nobody ever made him answer for it. If that unsettles you, wait until you see what happened when a king didn't even need to hide the bodies because he made it legal. Number 4. Henry VIII executed 2 of his 6 wives. Number 4 is the one you learned as a nursery rhyme, without ever learning how dark it actually is. Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. You know it. What you probably didn't sit with is the pattern hiding underneath it. Henry VIII's hunt for a male heir reshaped an entire country's religion and cost 2 of his 6 wives their lives. Take Anne Boleyn, wife number 2. She helps Henry break from Rome. She gives him a daughter, Elizabeth. What she doesn't give him is a son, and suddenly you'd have heard accusations of adultery, incest, even witchcraft. Charges most historians will tell you were fabricated from the start. You watch Anne tried in a court that had already decided her fate, beheaded in 1536. The next event was even more disturbing. Years later, Catherine Howard, his fifth wife, young, used by her own family as social currency, is executed over rumors of a past relationship. Both women weren't just removed from power, they were nearly erased from history until, decades later, Anne's own daughter took the throne and restored her mother's name. If you're looking for the pattern that runs through this entire list, you'll find an early version of it right here. A ruler who treated people as useful right up until the moment they weren't. And the next three entries prove it wasn't just people the crown was willing to sacrifice, it was entire populations. Number 3. Colonial massacres under Queen Victoria's reign. Number 3 is what happens when an empire stops pretending to be polite about power. If you were ever taught the British Empire as a story of order and progress, this is the part you probably weren't given. By 1876, when Victoria becomes Empress of India, the empire shifts from trade and influence into outright military occupation across Africa, India, and beyond. Picture the resistance that follows, and picture it met, again and again, with overwhelming force. During the 1857 Indian uprising, entire villages are destroyed and civilians punished collectively. Campaigns against the Zulu and Ashanti kingdoms follow the same script. Towns razed, treasures looted, resistance crushed far beyond what the moment called for. Here's what you need to sit with. None of this is rogue behavior. It's sanctioned, directly or indirectly, by royal authority under a crown telling the public a very different story about civilizing missions and benevolent rule. You'll recognize the most infamous name from this era, the 1919 Amritsar massacre, where troops opened fire on an unarmed crowd, killing hundreds. It happens just after Victoria's death. But trace it back, and the military doctrine and racial hierarchy that made it possible were built and celebrated throughout her entire reign. If you've ever pictured Victoria as simply a grieving widow in black lace, hold that image next to this one. But bullets weren't even the empire's favorite weapon. Number 2 is proof that the crown could kill millions without ever firing a shot. Number 2. Queen Victoria's empire and the Irish and Indian famines. Number 2 is a number so large it's almost impossible to picture. Somewhere between 6 and 11 million dead, across 2 famines, under one crown. Here's a detail to sit with. While 1 million people starved to death in Ireland between 1845 and 1852, food kept leaving the country by the shipload. Grain, livestock, butter, all still flowing out to English markets while your neighbours starved, if you'd lived through it. That's not exaggeration. That's the policy you'd have lived under. Free trade first. Charity, the thinking went, would only make people lazy. Queen Victoria's total contribution to Irish famine relief, around £2,000. Records show she spent about the same amount that year on a single piano. But that's not even the whole story. Decades later, the same pattern repeats in India. The famine of 1876 to 1878 kills an estimated 5 to 10 million people, worsened by colonial taxation and a refusal to stop grain exports during the crisis. If you needed relief, you were often required to perform hard labor for food that couldn't keep you alive. 2 famines, 2 continents, millions of deaths that weren't bad luck, they were policy, made in London, at a desk, far from anyone who was actually starving. If you thought that was the worst thing the crown ever profited from, you'd still be wrong, because number 1 isn't a tragedy the crown failed to stop. It's a business the crown built on purpose and ran for over 200 years. Number 1. The crown profited directly from slavery. Number 1 isn't a single scandal. It's the foundation everything else on this list stands on. From the 1500s through the 1800s, the British monarchy wasn't a bystander to the transatlantic slave trade. It was a licensor, a shareholder, an active participant. Look at the Royal African Company, founded in the 1660s under the patronage of the future King James II. It held a royal charter to trade gold, silver, and human beings. By the time it stops operating, over 100,000 African people have been transported into bondage, most bound for British colonies in the Caribbean and the Americas. This isn't the crown quietly looking away from private profiteers, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Royal charters, royal patronage, royal shareholdings. Money from enslaving human beings flows straight into royal treasuries for generations. Here's the part that should really stop you. When slavery is finally abolished across the empire in 1833, the British government pays out roughly £20 million in compensation. Not to the people who were enslaved, to the slave owners who'd lost their property, including members of the royal family itself. The people who were actually enslaved get their freedom, and nothing else. So the next time you look at the wealth, the palaces, the sheer permanence of this institution, ask yourself where some of it actually came from. Every secret on this list, from the princes in the tower to Meghan Markle's interview, comes down to the same instinct: protect the institution, control the story, let silence do the rest. This is the one that shows you exactly what all that protecting was for. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.